Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now, I bet you're going to say that, oh, the Dragon Ball Super Manga, oh, that's trash, and that we really shouldn't be giving this the time of day, and that it might be best just to forget about it. It's not canon. No, we're not at that point yet, but sometimes I feel that we're close. Haverok and I, for the longest time, really liked the Granolah saga, when it first began especially. It seemed to be a refreshing change of pace, talking about Saiyan lore from a different perspective. More Dragon Balls, more Namekian lore. It sounded to us like the perfect manner in which to talk more about the universe of the Dragon World. Only it ultimately turned into an encounter which we're slowly starting to care less and less about. And it doesn't help that we have to wait a month every single darn time. What does this all mean, Masako? Put simply, dear friend, it seems that the Super Manga is fast approaching the same cyclical issues that has befallen it before, that we had with the likes of the Moro saga. That's the phenomena where we, when it comes to the final act of a particular arc, are really starting to feel exhausted with the whole ordeal. And to see it fall from grace like this again makes it all the more galling for us to witness. I bet you can relate that with any type of story that you love to begin with, and then it starts to drag on for a very long time and ultimately ends with a lackluster flourish, or it been going on for so long that you end up just not caring how it concludes, just how it concludes. This might seem to be the case here. I'm afraid I just don't think Gine cameos can save it. We always start the new cycle of any recent Dragon Ball manga saga with being excited for what is being established. We are very positive with the initial premise and how it's differing itself from the past story, that it's a change of pace finally, something different. And to be fair though, Moro didn't really have to try all that hard, since we just come out of a rather mediocre interpretation of the Tournament of Power. But the longer these stories go, the more problems become apparent. And these have to do more often than not with pacing. Toyotaro has a big problem with this. The Tournament of Power arc really brought this to the fore. He had his heart on his pen. He didn't like this arc. He rushed that saga to the point of it being a completely jumbled mess. But hey, at least his version of Jiren was much more fleshed out than the anime version. But then we reread the whole Moro saga from start to finish in one go, when the entire story was available. And I've come to the conclusion that, oh, it wasn't as bad as it felt during the actual monthly release schedule. It was actually pretty good. We could be a little bit more forgiving with the said tome, even the senzu bean incident. But not by much though. What is it about the structure of this whole thing that makes us irritated at Toyotaro's way of running the manga? Or at least the manner in which he has been able to abide by. Does the former Toybal, a fan manga artist and writer, have to follow very strict and linear guidelines, even though he is meant to be the Toriyama 2.0? Well, we have some ideas as to why this might be the case, and why the state of the Super Manga currently is what it is amongst the fandom. So, sit with us for a while, and listen to what we have to say, and come to your own conclusions. Perhaps you might feel a little bit more empathetic toward the chap. Or you may feel right in your way of thinking, it's up to you. First and foremost, we need to compare the Super Manga to the original Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z manga. Back in the days of the original run of Dragon Ball from 1984 to 1995, the chapters were much shorter than what we get these days, and were coming out on a weekly basis. The current Super Manga release schedule is very unorthodox. It fell into line with most manga chapters back then, and now actually the original Dragon Ball, about 17 pages or so in length, and everything felt more condensed. There wasn't much time to dwell on the events in the chapter, as in a few days' time, the next chapter would be out, and you get the whole experience repeating itself again and again. Remember when the Dragon Ball Super anime was coming out? It's basically that, only in book form. You didn't have time to get too bogged down before the payoff or conclusion or continuation of the series would give you some answers or more questions, and then said chapters were then later released into volumes, completed books, a default way of reading the manga in the West, since we really didn't typically get chapter-based releases, but Now online releases via Viz and Manga Plus, for example, are fixing that. You can buy a volume of the manga and go at your own pace. You can either speed read it in a couple of hours, or you can go chapter by chapter and take your time. It really didn't matter. You could do what you like. Again, rereading the whole thing makes it feel very fast-paced. If you are used to the length of the anime and haven't read the manga in a while, or at all, you will be surprised how quickly everything progresses. But we also know that the anime has some pacing issues of its own, in order to give Toriyama time to draw new chapters, which would then later be adapted, which resulted in numerous filler episodes and mini-arcs, and the most infamous example of this being the Goku and Frieza fight on Namek. The shortest gap that Dragon Ball Z had between the manga coming out and the anime coming out got to about 4 weeks or so. That's a month between the manga chapter and the anime. That is very, very short. That's very tight for any series. So naturally things have to slow down a bit, and you can chalk up the trope of long fights to that. That infamous encounter, the Goku Frieza fight, was all because of the anime team having to curb their speed to allow Toriyama to attain a more sustainable buffer again. Trust us, we here know about buffers. We normally have at least 6 weeks worth of content, ideally, for you to enjoy. So it means we can actually have a break. Nowadays, we mostly remember the iconic moments from that fight, instead of recalling how long it felt to get through that battle. Thankfully, that's been lost to time. Even when we were watching it daily on TV back in the day. But thanks to video on demand and double speed and episode guides, we can skip the laborious and tedious stuff, and we can tailor-make our experience of these moments however we want to make it feel less sluggish. And besides, most of us would just rewatch that segment through Kai anyway. I mean, that's what I did with my nephews when they watched Dragon Ball for the first time. But this moment is one of the biggest miscreants of the Dragon Ball pacing issue going. There's no escaping that. It's the effective poster child for this particular phenomena. Naturally, these issues are not present in Dragon Ball Super Broly or Dragon Ball Super Superhero, the two most recent movies. In movies, you cannot have questionable pacing, or else it will be very much called out. It's a very glaring issue to have. It's imperative that you get the pacing right or as good as possible. In a series, you can maybe get away with it, but movie, nuh-uh. That being said, the newest installment does have pacing issues which could be described as a little weird, but not in an entirely bad way. The movie Superhero feels almost Western in its premise, as well as its soundtrack and overall composition. Akio Iyoku, Toriyama's right-hand man, even confirms this in an interview, that this is not entirely coincidental. This was quite intentional, this idea, to make this movie feel more like a typical superhero movie, hence the name. Or a movie that foreign audiences could get behind more, something similar to what they're accustomed to with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In short, this movie will fit right in with all of the other movies that you would most likely watch. And whilst you're watching this video, you may be telling yourself that, oh, we're being unfair about all of this. After all, it's easier to set up the pacing for a singular movie than an entire saga for a manga or maybe an anime, but for this Dragon Ball Super manga, you have to plan well in advance and make sure that what you set out to do gets realized over a couple of years, whilst in a movie, you have one script, and sure, it may take years to develop the whole thing, but you have time to fettle the script, to tweak it many times to get the optimal result. Manga, you don't really have the luxury of time. This is also true because during the cinematic adventures, the Dragon team had much more hands on deck to fix any problems of what we just said. And we are not quite sure how many people influenced Toyotaro's manga other than Toriyama and himself, so that doesn't help. But we cannot ignore certain issues that have been plaguing his creation for a long time. Ever since it started back in 2015. We aren't the first to tell you this, that the monthly 35 to 45 page format just simply doesn't work. At all. And why do we get this monthly format in the first place? On the surface, you would think that having more pages would be ideal, right? Having double the page count of a typical manga chapter, you have plenty of space in which to present your story. Shouldn't those extra pages be beneficial, I hear you say? Shouldn't it feel like 2 or sometimes 3 chapters of the original Dragon Ball manga in one go? Well, you see, that is true numerically speaking. It does allow the creator to cram in more content. But again, the delivery of said content is the issue. And there is also another factor in which we must address. Aside from certain creative decisions that have come about over the years, which we won't be boring you about the details today, the biggest issue is that Toyotaro simply doesn't plan his chapters out like the classic Dragon Ball manga, even though he is trying to emulate the original manga in terms of style and substance, as part of him becoming the new bastion of Dragon Ball's drawn content. Instead, he's trying to frame these chapters like episodes of the anime, as if he's trying to storyboard it, and then repackage it in manga form. Surely that would be the job of the anime team, Toyotaro. Why are you trying to do two jobs in one? Would you rather be a storyboarder rather than working on the manga? Of course, this is by no way a new thought of ours. We've often thought about this since we started covering the manga on a regular basis around about chapter 53. But in the most recent chapters of the Super manga, it has sadly become even more apparent. Back in the day, we could look past it in the sense that things in the Moro saga, all that, things happened rather frequently. There was a lot of action in there. It was quite cool. And realize that the Granolah saga now is set to be longer than the Moro saga, and less stuff is happening in it. They've not left Planet Cereal since chapter 71. That's like nearly 18 months ago. That's not good. And we thought Moro's story was long-winded. You see, fights add dynamism into the animated series and are a spectacle in of themselves. But in this case, we know our Dragon Ball tropes, and while we have new forms and attacks being shown to us up the wazoo, there is not that much that we haven't seen already. And even though we have 35 to 45 pages to work with every month, the plot advances like in those old 17-page chapters, only the story cannot compensate for its length. In layman's terms, these chapters are simply overblown, unnecessary, and are being slowly drip-fed. We don't blame Toyotaro solely for it being a monthly release, by the way. We don't know who is specifically responsible for such a state of affairs, and with him having to receive notes and corrections from Toriyama, it's unlikely that he demanded Toyotaro such a format for himself. After all, we get drafts about 10 days out before the manga is released, so he isn't slow. But on the other hand, he is responsible for mapping out the chapter. Think about it this way. This arc has been going on for 17 months of this recording, and we haven't seen present Granolah, well, conscious at least, since February. That was 4 chapters ago, and it's supposed to be his story. That means he has been absent for almost a quarter of his own arc. Granted, some of you might point out to us fairly that Goku's been absent through long portions of his own battles and stories in the past, only to then return at the right time many chapters later. And we do accept that. That is quite true. But the reality is that when you look at this from a broader point of view, we've been following Goku for about 38 years at this point. I think we can take a little break from Goku every now and then. He's not going to be going away forever, folks. This guy, Granolah, is a new character, and we have a feeling that he's not going to be around for much longer, probably within this self-contained story. And in the anime with weekly releases, 4 episodes or so doesn't feel that bad to get through. There's little time to fester on a duff episode or where is Poochie? Or enough time for content creators to moan about it. But with the monthly manga system, it feels like an eternity. 4 months. You read it, you get mad or hype, then you forget about it until about 3 days until the next chapter comes out, and we repeat. In between, there's a huge chasm of nothing. It also doesn't help that the manga is still in V-Jump's top 50 most read installments, despite not having an anime going on, and that their treatment is as follows. Between this film and Toyotaro Sensei's manga, we currently have 2 lines of Dragon Ball Super running. This film, Superhero, is written purely as a sequel to Broly, and in this magazine's pages, we have the continuing story of Goku and Vegeta. We'll see new strong enemies show up, and new stories and events will continue to progress. Of course, Toriyama diligently, yeah, right, oversees the storylines for the manga too. So it's like we have events running in parallel. Oh, that's another thing. Superhero and the fact that it's genuinely trying to change the iconography of Dragon Ball, and then we compare it to the manga, it really actually enhances the issues of the manga even more because Superhero is really good at highlighting characters and giving them stuff to do. It just makes the problem even worse. But in regards to that statement, basically, the creators of the Dragon Room, that's Shueisa's Dragon Ball department solely, do not bother themselves with the continuity, not really. They're not going to be getting themselves in a flap about what's canon and what isn't canon. As far as they're concerned, the manga and anime can run separately, or they can work together. It's up to what Toriyama wants to do. The manga stuff could happen in the anime, or it might not. It's not relevant for this new movie though. The thing is though, is that the manga is the most consistent progression of the story going, with movies and videos being larger, rarer events. And we do feel that there are certain things that can be improved upon in an anime adaptation. After all, that's what most creatives like to do. Add things to the anime or cut things from the anime to make the experience and story flow better, or maybe different enough to warrant people checking out both mediums and spending twice as much money. Sure, Dragon Ball in general still is popular and not nearly as bad as is often framed, but we just wish that we wouldn't fall into the same cycle of exhaustion every time a new arc comes to its conclusion. We'll probably read all of the Granolah saga once it's done and consider it to be fine, but wouldn't it be cool if one of these days we felt that it was great from the start? But yeah, pacing is a hard thing to get right, and we would be hypocrites not to acknowledge that sometimes we ourselves struggle with pacing on our channel for our what-ifs. But for what it's worth, we are trying to improve. And seeing how the media behemoth that is Dragon Ball is still having these problems after over 30 years of experience doesn't make us feel so bad in comparison. But what do you folks think? Do you think it can be fixed? Check out our monthly manga reviews in one go to get up to date, and I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!